All right, I think it's time to get started for today's session. So, greetings from snowy Jyväskylä. We got our first snow of the year today, and it's quite a storm outside, looking white, and also happy Halloween. I've got a pumpkin jack o' lantern here that my son carved over the week, and it's really cool looking. So, I added a picture here to the intro slide. And greetings, welcome to today's webinar. It's called How to Create Sustainable High Performance Cultures, a top-down approach for success. So welcome to the session, and I'm Tiina Hoffman from Firstbeat, and I'm here with my guest Satu Ahlman, who is the founder of Saga Performance and has worked for over a decade with executive and management team assessments and leadership development globally in many different organizations. I'll let Satu tell more about herself and start the presentation in just a few minutes. Sustainable well-being and good performance require a lot of right choices, both at the individual level and also at the company culture level. And that's what Satu is going to discuss today, how to create resilient high-performance organizations on these different levels. Our session today is going to last 45 minutes. You can write questions in the Q&A box that you can see on your screen. And then after the webinar, Satu and I will answer them at the end of the session. And also we'll provide you a recording afterwards in case you came late or have to leave early, for example. If you are new to Firstbeat, please visit our website to read more about our background and what it is that we do, or you can also contact us directly. But I thought I'd sort of set the scene and start the presentation with this picture that addresses performance from a sort of an interesting angle. So you can see the green line here, which sort of illustrates an optimal level of performance for an individual, and then the graph that undulates up and down, that sort of illustrates the ups and downs of life. To maintain good performance, we need to find an individually appropriate and suitable balance between stress and the different demands of life and recovery. And everyone understands that sometimes that line is going to be going down a little bit more because we might have particularly heavy or stressful periods. But the idea of coaching programs, or for example, having data and following your own performance is to help prevent problems early enough. Sort of recognize these moments when the stress is starting to build up, when there is signs that the person is not coping well, their performance is starting to suffer, they are starting to show signs of excessive stress. And that's the time to start making some corrective actions. Sort of start taking some steps in the right direction to try to figure out what it takes to get back to the optimal level seen up here, instead of just continually building on that kind of a stressful situation where the risks of different kind of illnesses and conditions start increasing, and eventually you might end up having burnout or having to go on sick leave or have some other kind of physical or mental health condition. So this is sort of the goal, is to start recognizing these kind of moments early enough. And it's not easy, as obviously all the different statistics that show us how prevalent burnout and different kind of stress-related conditions are today. The working life of today tends to be very intensive and fast-paced. But lucky thing, I think, is that these topics are discussed these days, and they are sort of on top of the agenda in many organizations. And just to give a little bit of an insight from how data can help with these kind of situations, this is a 24-hour graph from Firstbeat Life. Probably familiar to most of you, but I do know there's some newer people, so just very, very short background on that. The idea with this kind of data is to help show where the problems might be in a person's lifestyle and then start addressing them. The red color means some kind of stress. The sympathetic nervous system is active. It's not all bad, but if it's excessive and ongoing, then it starts to cause some problems. The green color means recovery, means that the nervous system is relaxing and recovering and heart rate is slowing down. This is a 24-hour reading, and the idea is to start seeing where to maybe put some kind of action. It's a tool that's used in different kind of coaching programs to make things visible and concrete in a way, and provide personalized insights about stress and recovery, sleep, exercise, those kind of habits. If you want to learn more about the Firstbeat Life offering, or for example, how you could use that in your coaching, so that's when I encourage you to then reach out to us here at Firstbeat and we can tell you more about that. Before I let Satu on, a couple of quick findings from our big data, because we have done those kind of measurements for a long time now. We have tens of thousands of measurements during different periods, and this is a really interesting finding that looks at the share of very inactive work days. So 24-hour periods that have a work period included in that, where there is less than 1,000 steps. So when we follow that trend from 2017 all the way up to spring of 2022, the percent of those kind of really passive work days is pretty small, somewhere around 6 to 8%. But then obviously when the pandemic hit, we all were shut inside our houses and couldn't go anywhere. So there was a sudden, very dramatic increase in these kind of unhealthily inactive days. But what surprised us was how long that trend stayed elevated. For several years, almost 2 years, it stayed significantly higher. And even in 2022 and 23, when we started get back close to the pre-pandemic levels, still there's clearly more of those very, very passive days, clearly explained by the bigger prevalence of remote working days. And then when we still compare remote working days to office working days, there is a clear difference in activity levels. The orange color here looks at the amount of, or the percent of physical activity, some kind of light activity during the day when we are going to the office, and the blue illustrates the same when we are working remotely. And it's easy to see that there's a clear activity peak in the morning when people go to the office. Even if they drive or take a train, they still have to walk somewhere. And same thing happens again at lunchtime. Whereas at home, you are only moving between rooms and the physical activity stays at a much lower level. And that's something that all of us coaches who work with high level performance from different comprehensive angles, we have to address this, because clearly it's difficult to stay healthy and well if we are only passively sitting in front of the computer all day. And that's something that also comes to some of the topics that I know Satu is going to be talking about. But I think at this, I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and Satu, you can take over. So welcome, Satu, for the webinar today, and I look forward to hearing your insights on this topic.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction, Tiina, and very important insights. Let me just share my screen and we will get started.
Great.
Perfect. All right. So happy Halloween and greetings from a very grayish, rainy Sweden. Important topic, high performance. A lot of people talk about high performance, and a lot of organizations want to be seen as high performing organizations, high performance cultures. If we look at this slide here, what is alarming is that a lot of high performance cultures are backfiring nowadays. We're actually disabling innovation with the constant grinding, because we are so busy. That's also affecting our communication, the transparency, which then might lead to lack of trust. And all of this affects not just talent attraction and retention, which is already a big thing, also our daily productivity and overall resilience. So the topic of today, how to create sustainable high performance cultures, a top-down approach for success. We're going to be talking about individuals and organizations, data-driven change, but we have to start from the basics, the basic level of understanding what high performance actually is. So that's the big question. For years, I thought I knew what high performance was and lived accordingly, and realized later on that I was wrong. So how to define high performance? And I think that's a question for you as well. Reflect on that. But now we're going to have a quick poll. 2 questions. Do you consider yourself to be a high performer as an individual? And the second question, do you consider your organization, where you're working at currently, to be a high performing organization? It'll be interesting to see what kind of percentages we get.
Yeah, that's great. I'm seeing there is still answers coming in, so let's just give it a few more seconds and then I'll read out the percentages from here.
Yeah, perfect.
It definitely looks like we are leaning in towards having a high performing audience. Looks like about 65% of the people are saying that yes, they consider themselves to be a high performer, and about 60% of the people consider the organization that they are running or working for to be a high performing organization. So interesting
Wow.
statistics. So about 58 to 45 right now on the organization and 68 to 33 on the individual. So now we can hear from Satu what does that actually mean, and then we can see how we would answer after that. But yeah, thank you everyone for taking part.
Thank you. Yes, I think I don't have an answer to exactly what does that mean, what you just answered, because that is highly individual. Your perception, your definition of high performance, even when it relates to your organization and its culture, is of course very unique to you. Now, even more important to be discussed with a wider audience, because high performance may backfire, as we know already this far. So my name is Satu Ahlman. I'm the founder of Saga Performance. I work with individuals, private clients, and organizations who consider themselves as high performers. What we want to do and what the mission is for Saga Performance is to redesign the concept of high performance, to make it sustainable and healthy, to focus on topics such as resilience, self-leadership, walk the talk leadership. By utilizing a systems approach, you could say a holistic approach, where we use data, science-based testing, and behavior-focused sparring and advisory to enable this type of transformation and growth for organizations and individuals. Another fundamental question to start with is, what is your personal relation to change? Now, you don't need to reply to this, just reflect on that, because change is a big thing. Change happens all the time, everywhere, whether you like it or not. A lot of people in high-performing organizations tend to say, as per my observations, that they really enjoy change. And they actually would not like to be working in an organization where change does not happen. Well, surprise, surprise, change happens all the time. Then it's the speed of change that affects us. Now, it could become very overwhelming if we are forced to change all the time and we have no control over it. Then again, it might be so much fun when you are the one initiating the change and get others follow you. Either way, the more new we create, the faster we are, the more hectic, the more exciting, and the more exhausting it happens to be for our brain and body. And this is something the organizations and we as human beings need to take into consideration in how we lead our lives, how we lead our performance. There's so much happening all the time, also partly due to social media. Everything is connected all the time, but we are also ourselves triggering and are triggered by all the triggers, the action that is happening around us, that it may really take a toll on us. So how do we actually then redefine and redesign high performance? So starting from, what is it? What do we mean with that? And where do we want to be? How do we make it sustainable and healthy? I didn't say that, Darwin did, but it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one most adaptable to change. And this links me to the topic of resilience. If we are and have a very resilient baseline, we are most likely better off with changing situations than the ones who are not so resilient. We're going to later on talk about what resilience actually is as well. But also important to keep in mind that it's not just the fact that I know a lot, I am capable of doing this and that, I have all the skills and I love change. It is really about your baseline condition. Whether we are talking about physical changes or mental changes at work or in life. So how do we create resilient, high-performing organizations, and why does that matter? First, even if we don't define what resilience is, it's super important for all the leaders out there, and every one of us could be a leader, not depending on your title. But we got to be the example. We got to set the example to ourselves first, and then to others. We got to walk the talk, and I'm going to be repeating this, walking the talk, later on in the presentation as well, because that's where it starts. It starts with self-awareness of your habits, your stress levels, your behaviors, your mindset, your way of communication towards yourself and towards others. You got to be in control of yourself, and then you can lead others. And you got to trust. So these are some of the cornerstones for individuals and organizations. What do we mean and what do we need if we want to keep on performing on a top level? We got to create trust. We got to create behaviors and attitudes that others can follow, that are healthy and sustainable. And now the big question. So if we want to create trust, is then control controversial? Is adding more structure actually going to be limiting us? And now I'm going to challenge you and say, well, most of us actually don't like the word control at all. The more creative people we speak to, the more I hear, I don't like structure, I don't like control. I'm going to challenge that and say, you probably need more control than what you actually think you need. Imagine you have a playground that has no fences. Imagine that's your organization. That's where you can play each and every day. But no one is going to tell you, when did you actually hit the goal? When did you actually step over a board? When did you go outside your comfort zone? Because there is no playground. There are no fences. And that means that it's going to be very difficult to lead yourself. So in a healthy, high-performing organization, we have enough structure and enough control in a positive way that will support us to get the best out of ourselves. And actually, the more we have this, and this could be routines, this could be KPIs, depending on if we're talking about individuals or organizations or teams, this will enable creativity, like it or not. You're actually getting more out of yourselves. The better routines you have, the better structure and the better control in terms of being able to lead yourself. How to enable performance. So again, let's go to the fundamentals. And I'm going to say this is not rocket science, but this requires some time for us to think and reflect and to start leading ourselves and our teams and our organizations in a systematic way. 3 words: meaning, willingness, and ability. These should be key questions for you to ask yourself each and every morning when you go to work or when you wake up. These could also be 3 key questions that you ask your colleagues, your team, your neighbor, your family members. Now, what I mean with this are that if you ask yourself, do I understand the meaning of why I'm going to work, what I'm contributing with? And you say, yes, that's already great. Then the second question is, do I have the willingness, the motivation to do the work that I'm supposed to be doing? Great. Thirdly, do I have the skills, the tools, the structure, the processes, what I need to support me, to give me the ability to do the work? Yes, yes, yes. Brilliant. Then we can start expecting action, and hopefully 100% action, performance, top level performance. But the simplest answer, no, to one of these, or to all of them, or two of them, already requires some more thinking. Because if a team leader has a team who doesn't have the willingness, but definitely has the ability and should even understand why they're coming to work, we cannot expect 100% performance or even mediocre level performance if the willingness is not there. Or if I don't understand what I'm contributing with, why am I doing the work? What is my role in the organization? Again, probably hindering me to do the utmost, my best performance. Or I just didn't get the tools. I didn't get the information about what is my playground, or I didn't get the skills, the training, the support, the coaching I needed, or even the fundamental education to do my work in the best possible way. How does this link to the big picture if we look at it from the organizational perspective? And here you have it. So most of the organizations nowadays talk about purpose, because we know that for the generations entering the workforce now, it's probably more important than ever before to have this kind of a connection to the purpose, to your own purpose, and then link to the purpose of your organization where you belong to. So that has to be crystal clear. Now, I'm challenging that with a lot of my clients and asking the question, is it actually crystal clear? Is your purpose actually your purpose? What is the bigger thing that you're contributing towards? So it's not an easy answer. But then we have strategy, culture, and structure. So the roadmap towards where you want to be, the culture, the values, bringing the togetherness, the engagement, bringing the people together. How are we supposed to behave? How do we talk to each other? What is the level of trust that we have? Super important. And structure, that has all the processes, the KPIs, all that, the tools. So all of these are connected. And if we take one away, we can't really expect that we get high quality daily performance from all levels of the organization. And a lot of times we put emphasis on strategy. We got to know what the roadmap is, strategy 2027. And that's great. But then again, is that actually translated to a language that every single employee understands? Because if not, that could affect the motivation. The meaning is not there. So even if we would focus on the culture work, which I strongly emphasize and recommend, you might not get the most out of your culture, and people's motivation might not be on the right level or where it could be potentially if the strategy is unclear. Similarly, if there are no processes, which I've seen in a lot of growth companies, startups I worked with, that we just haven't had the time to put the effort into building all those KPIs and those processes that would need to be there to support our performance. So these come together. And if we look back on those three questions, this is where we have them. So the meaning is connected to the strategy. The culture and the willingness are connected. And the structure and the ability are connected. So this is a simple, not rocket science model that I strongly recommend you as an individual, but also you as an organizational leader, to take with you and start having dialogues with the help of these key questions. And it doesn't have to be very complicated. It could just be, do I have the meaning? Do I have the willingness? Do I have the ability? Check, check, check. Great. If not, let's dig deeper. Going back to resilience and self-leadership, they are in the core of today's leadership. A lot of discussions, a lot of articles coming out about these topics. And I remember when the pandemic started, many of my clients started asking about, okay, can you come and talk about or teach us self-leadership? This is so important because now everyone is working remotely, and so we can't be there to lead people on their daily work, so they got to lead themselves. Funnily, yeah, that's the real life right now. It's not just because of a pandemic. We are there all the time. Even before the pandemic, self-leadership was crucial, whether we knew about it or not. You have to be able to lead yourself before you can perform nor lead others. And resilience, I said that we got to talk about what resilience actually is. It's not just your willpower. Many times when I ask the question, people answer, yeah, it's my willpower that will get me through a stressful period of time. Yes, part of it, yes. Again, we got to look into resilience from a very holistic point of view. This is one way of looking into resilience. My partner, our partner company, Mind Matters, has a psychometric resilience assessment tool called the Personal Resilience Indicator. And this gives a very holistic view on your current level of resilience, but it could also be giving you, from an organizational perspective, an overview on where your organization stands. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into the test itself, but just want to give you the idea of how many different levels we have within the topic of resilience. As you can see here on the right side, you have health, purpose, problem solving, perseverance, composure that has to do with your emotions and emotional agility, your relationships. A lot of that was discussed during the pandemic, the social distancing, how that affects our health, overall physical and mental health. And obviously also the emotional executive balance. So all of these are interconnected, and you can see that health has categories as sleep and lifestyle. Sleep being the ground force for anyone who wants to be resilient or being able to perform. If you take away sleep or have poor quality sleep, you're going to have a tough time taking decisions, solving problems, using your analytical capacity or even your creative insights. It's going to be issues with your relationships, your temper, your emotional agility and literacy, and affecting your optimism as well. Sleep will not solve all the issues, but that's a good starting point. So self-awareness enables self-leadership. Spending time and actually reflecting and booking time in your agenda and your calendars for self-reflection could be a starting point. Because we don't do that. I'm guessing not the majority of you, please correct me if I'm wrong, don't have the time booked in their calendars right now for reflection time. If you have, I love it. A lot of my clients, they don't have it until we put it there. And that starts to create that kind of a feeling of I'm in better control. So instead of just blindly grinding years and years forward, how about mindfully grinding? So meaning that we understand ourselves and we know when to push the pedal and when to pull the brake. Because that way we can truly lead our performance. We know this is a time we can reach new levels, or this is a time where I actually should just look within and do some reflection. One of the nice ways, obviously, is to use data to lead performance. And I love working with the Firstbeat technology because it really gives the objectivity and takes away the guessing. Takes away the guesswork from both the individual in question, but also if we look into organizations, you can get much better understanding of what you should be proactively, hopefully, working on going forward. Stress levels, sleep, physical activity, or the mental side of things. And while I'm not going to deep dive into how Firstbeat works, I just want to comment on the fact that there are a lot of organizations that are utilizing data in their leadership in a really, really nice way. And then there are a lot of organizations that could be potentially doing that. And what I've seen is that when you start helping individuals to see how they actually perform, not just based on feedback that they get from colleagues or their bosses, but this kind of feedback, that really creates change. And that really can be seen in the long run in how the actual organization is performing. So, cliche or not, work smarter, not harder. I've heard this many, many times, but I really like it. And what does it mean then? For me, it means we got to build the playground. We got to really define the fences. And this could be you defining, these are my boundaries. Or for the organization to say, okay, these are the processes, these are the tools, this is the playground that you have, dear employee. And then start creating that headspace. Because actually, the playground and the fences will create the space for you so that you can be in charge and lead yourself better with the tools that you are being provided with. And that leads, important for organizations, commercial success, but in general, success in life. Because the more you can be in control of yourself and being aware of who you are, what you like, what you don't like, but also what gives you energy, what takes energy, how can you improve your capacity, your sleep, your cognitive capacity, your physical capacity. All the knowledge which is possible to get for you is going to help you to be able to lead yourself and hit those new goals and perform on the level that you want years to come. Again, I promise you, I will not stop repeating this. Leaders got to walk the talk, and every one of us is the leader, so we got to take the responsibility. But especially if you are in a leadership role, in a functional role in an organization, you got to set the example for your team. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be emailing midnight to your team members and saying, don't do as I'm doing. You go to sleep, but I got to work hard. It's not the way it works. So you got to build the culture and everyone is acting accordingly. And that is all from my side. And I would love to hear your questions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Satu. Great, really interesting and good points and highlights there. Couple that I really wanted to sort of pick myself on. One is the you said that resilience does not equal willpower. I often use that, and since you and I are both Finnish, or you're Finnish Swedish, or
are
Finnish,
yeah.
So everybody who knows something about Finland knows that sisu is this Finnish word that kind of, it's like it's perseverance, or this kind of tough attitude that Finns have needed over the years. And I often have also said that resilience is fundamentally different from sisu, because sisu is more like this guts and just pushing yourself harder and trying to make it, whereas resilience clearly requires that you build that kind of a healthy balance in your body, so that when the time comes and you need to dig into that reserve, you have the ability to react to that. And actually, related to that, there was a good question from let me double check what it is. Simon asked for your comment. He said that surely biological health is also key to resilience. What's your take on that, Satu?
Absolutely, absolutely. So physiological, biological health is really well linked to, or it's a crucial part of your resilience. So it's both the mental game and the physiological game, and your genetics play a role as well. We have nowadays genetic testing for specifically linked to resilience.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, like the resilience, it is, even if the genetics affects that, the very concrete lifestyle actions that we can do ourselves to build that resilience bank so it's strong enough. So, for example, sleeping enough, or for example,
Yes.
some of the other things that Satu mentioned, walking the talk and following those guidelines. And I'm totally with you on that walk the talk part. Whether you are a wellness coach who is working with clients, or you are the
Yeah.
leader of a top leader of an organization, we have to show the example. It doesn't mean that we have to be, images of perfection by any means, but we need to make the effort and we need to follow those kind of healthy guidelines ourselves. And everybody is human, so the result doesn't have to be perfect, but it's more like the attitude level that we have to show.
Absolutely. And adding to the genetics as well, I work with epigenetics as an epigenetic performance coach. So I always tell my clients that whatever your genes are or your DNA, well, DNA won't change, but the fact that you can influence and impact your genes, that's where the key is. And that's what you do with your lifestyle choices. So whatever the genes are, your actions still play a much bigger role.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you also, before there's a couple more really good questions I want to ask, but I also wanted to ask you about your experience with these different kind of international companies and management teams and executive level projects. What are maybe one or two of the top findings that when you work with them, you measured some data from them. So what are the findings that come up from the data and sort of from their experience that they need to start working on?
Great question. A lot of insights. But let me just gather you the crucial ones. I would say a low-hanging fruit for a lot of executives and high performers are actually the micro breaks, which I see from the data and also from the discussions that we have that people are not taking. And micro breaks, when I break it down and tell people that it could be as short as 30 seconds between a talk or a meeting or an email, where you just leave everything and just let your brain take a break, which doesn't mean opening Instagram or Facebook or talking to someone or running around, but really implementing those micro breaks. And then if you have more time, it could be 10 minutes or 15 minutes. That makes a big, big difference. And that's what we can see. So it's the daytime recovery that most often needs more work than people realize. And the other one is that a lot of times, funnily, people think that when you have a very turbulent season or period of time where life gets hectic and work gets hectic, and everyone around you is like, okay, now we got to run, and you're running as fast as you can, and you tell everyone, I don't have the time to stop. That's exactly where you got to start stopping. That's where you got to implement those breaks, and that's where you got to take the lead of your own performance. And that's where people, unfortunately, oftentimes go wrong, and they say, I'll take the breaks when I have the time, later, when things calm down.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I agree. And the first slide that I had that showed that graph that was going up and down, I think everyone has periods maybe for a few days that might not be perfectly in balance, but it can't keep going for weeks on time. That then we should definitely start seeing the warning signs much earlier than waiting. Because if we wait for the busy period to be over in many jobs, that's not going to happen. There's always going to be some other new busyness that's going to come and other new task that has to get done. So yeah, let's not wait for that.
Yeah.
Here's a good question, tough one. Interested to hear what you have to say to this one from Tiina. Are you aware of any company where follow-up of stress levels is done in a proactive manner and acted upon before they become a problem?
I am aware of companies where they are currently implementing this kind of a more proactive approach, but I haven't, to be honest, haven't come across an organization where that would have been done already years back. So I think we are now in the stage where companies and people are much more aware of this, and some of the forefront organizations are now taking real action, which is amazing.
Yeah,
but too little, I would say.
Yeah, I would say the same, that I have, if I compare to the situation, for example, 10 years ago when I was in my early years working at Firstbeat and working with a lot of different international companies, I think the attitudes have changed towards healthier clearly, and the companies they have to have proactive measures, because otherwise they are losing their staff. People are kind of competitive in seeing where they want to work. But I think there is still quite a bit of work to be done, definitely.
Yes.
Good. We have time for a couple more questions. There is one here. Work smarter cannot exist in a personal vacuum. The corporate goals also have to be considered as part of this. So maybe just a comment on that. It's not really a question, but a good comment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think both. You can do a lot for yourself, obviously, but also I agree that you have to take into consideration where you're working at, not just the goals, but also, as I mentioned, the structure, the processes, the KPIs. What are you being measured against? So it's going to be really hard to work smart, not just hard, if the processes and the objectives are not supporting that.
Yeah, totally. And like, one of the examples that you gave earlier, that if the management keeps sending emails at 8 or 9 p.m., for example, they're setting that kind of culture that people, they know that they should be working smarter, not harder. But if they constantly see examples to the contrary, it's kind of difficult to have the courage to follow that.
Yeah. And it's also like who gives bonuses for what kind of behavior. So I've seen organizations where you get extra money because we've seen you been working so late, so many weeks and so many months, but we didn't actually look into how productive those hours were, but we were giving boosts for the wrong type, potentially the wrong type of behavior.
Yeah, that's true. Let me just put our final slide here because this has some contact information. So if in case somebody is having to leave, so here is already our thank you slide. If you want to learn more about Firstbeat, you can contact us, but you can also contact Satu directly. She's happy to answer questions about her model. There was a few questions about sort of more details about how deep you go in your offerings and in your coaching. So maybe those kind of questions might be good to address Satu directly. But there was a good question about like, do you include nutrition in your coaching? Do you include physical activity programs in your coaching? Do you actually start working with the company culture? So maybe you can give a few tips on sort of like how broad your offering is, or when do you then maybe take some other experts to address specific topics.
Yes, and that's the benefit of Saga Performance. So even if I would not have this certain expertise, let's say physical training programs, we do have those people under our umbrella. So yes, totally possible to do work on your physical training programs as well. Then when it comes to nutrition, yes, when it's linked to epigenetics, where we deep dive, if you're a private client, then we do a deep dive into your nutrition as well through epigenetic analysis and consultation. Then for the corporates, yes, a lot of my work nowadays is about fine-tuning or developing corporate cultures together with the leaders, the executives, the founders, if we're talking about startups or growth companies.
Yeah, and the one of the questions from Brad also asked specifically about physical activity, that a lot of the world thinks that something is better than nothing. Do you go as far as guiding the necessary training, for example, different type of weight training? So I would say that in general, most coaches probably focus on a comprehensive, well-balanced plan, that where something is better than nothing approach to physical activity is very relevant. The main thing is to get people moving and get them away from those under 1,000 step days, for example. But then, of course, depending on the focus of your coaching program, personal trainers are going to go much deeper into the details and specifics of the training program, whereas other types of coaches typically might refer their client that if you want a specific training program, it's probably best to get in touch with a personal trainer at the gym or something like that. So we all have to kind of draw the limit somewhere. But the basic blocks of lifestyle, enough sleep, good balance between stress and recovery, learning to structure your day in a healthy way, being active enough, those are the ones that probably should be part of all comprehensive coaching programs.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. I think we are at the end of our time, and looks like I think we've covered pretty much all the questions. I sort of lumped a couple of questions together. There is some thank yous from people who had to leave already, but thanks for joining us on this Halloween, and thanks Satu for sharing your information and insights on the topic. And yeah, be sure to be in touch with us if you have any questions with either one of us or at Firstbeat in general. And we are happy to share more information. And let's continue next time. Have a great day.
My pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.